So my name is Stephanie Alger. I'm a member of our Moo Dig Steering Committee, and I'm really excited to introduce our speakers today. Before we do that, let's get a little housekeeping out of the way. We are recording this session. It will be going up on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to go back and rewatch it or send it out to colleagues or anything like that. We have a bunch of old presentations on there too, if you don't get your fill of digital publishing talk today. And you can also join our mailing list where you will get updates on presentations, upcoming presentations, and meetings. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two presenters today, Andi Back and Dr. Maya Stiller from the University of Kansas. Andi is the Associate Librarian in Fine Arts and Humanities and has published research in collecting practices for university libraries and trends in digital and print resources. Maya is an Associate Professor in Korean Art and Visual Culture and is an avid supporter of digital humanities. She taught a graduate seminar titled Digital Humanities for Art Historians and has produced her own digital project, the Autographic Atlas of Korea. Maya has firsthand experience using digital publications in the classroom, which I know because I was in one of her seminars where we had an article from a digital publication assigned as reading. I'm so excited to hand it over now to Andi. After the presentations are finished, I'll hop back on and we'll have some time for questions. So feel free to post those in the chat and we can discuss at the end. All right, Andi.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I am going to attempt to share my screen. All right, you all can see this okay? And I'm going to hide our little faces. Okay. All right, well, good morning, everyone. So I was given us a list of questions and I'm going to attempt to answer them all, but I'm looking forward to answering more questions at the end of the presentations today. So in the spring of 2018, I published an article in Art Documentation, which is the journal of the Art Library Society of America, and it was titled The Collecting Practices for Art Exhibition Catalogs at Academic Libraries in the United States and Canada. The article reported on the results of a survey I conducted in the spring of 2017, and it was largely to gain insight into the contemporary trends and challenges of collecting US, Canadian, and European print and digital art exhibition catalogs by academic art librarians in the United States and Canada. The 24-question survey was emailed to a select list of 242 academic librarians in the United States and Canada, and it was largely based on the Art Library Society of North America, or RLSNA directory. Due to similarities in programs and populations, academic institutions were the sole focus of the survey that I sent out. So overall, 73 or 30% of those who received the email completed the survey. And the results represented a range of academic institutions, which I've highlighted on this slide for you all. While the results revealed several trends for the purposes of my presentation today, I'm going to focus solely on two findings related to digital art exhibition catalogs. So the first is the awareness of available digital art exhibition catalogs. And results of the survey revealed the top 3 ways that librarians learn about available art exhibition catalogs, specifically digital. And it's largely from, as you can see, listservs, dealer emails or catalogs, and faculty recommendations. And this slide shows the other ways that people mentioned that they learn about digital art exhibition catalogs. And I should mention too, it was a multiple choice option. So there's crossover, obviously. The second, oh, I'm sorry. The second thing that I want to highlight for you all from my survey results is that the acquisition and user discovery of digital art exhibition catalogs And at the time of the survey, 24 respondents, it indicated that they did not acquire digital art exhibition catalogs. Of the respondents that acquired digital art exhibition catalogs, only 38% indicated there was a system in place at their institutions to allow for public discovery of freely available digital catalogs. The survey revealed that discovery was more likely to be provided at four-year institutions and through catalog records or online library guides. It's possible that four-year academic institutions are more likely to have the tools and staff in place to provide discovery. So 6 years ago, what I wrote still holds very true today. And I have a quote from myself where I wrote, "Art librarians are not opposed to collecting digital publications. It is instead the lack of availability and systems to provide access and discovery that create a barrier." At my large academic institution, and true of many of KU's peer institutions, we are still reliant on established vendor relationships, acquisition systems, and available staff time. Collection building, acquiring, and cataloging are often different departments that communicate but follow different processes, procedures, and reporting lines. As an art librarian, I rely on established vendor and dealer relationships, faculty recommendations, art-specific news publications like Hyperallergic, but also my academic and art librarian colleagues. Listservs like ACRL Arts and Arliss NA, disciplinary publications like Art Documentation, reviews like Arliss NA Multimedia and Technology, attending conferences, the Digital Art History Directory, and electronic newsletters like Library Journal's Info Docket all keep me apprised of recently released and forthcoming digital art catalogs, monographs, and projects. On the more general acquisition side of the KU Library's collections, there are several vendors that have an open access or OA option, which our Library Acquisitions Department will turn on in our Summon Discovery, which is basically the behind the scenes of our Primo Discovery system, which many academic institutions use. So when they turn these on, it means that the title will display for the public in the Primo catalog. The cataloging department will also load MARC records vendors provide in Voyager, our behind the scenes integrated library system. For a library user to discover the title, the library either needs to have a MARC record we can add to Voyager or be indexed in our Primo Central Discovery Index subscription. The bulk of our OA resources are added to our collection on average about once a month through the Primo Central Discovery Index release, which is the acquisition staff is notified of new resources about once a month, and then they're loaded. If a collection development librarian becomes aware of a digital monograph, the information is passed along to the acquisitions department to check for costs, subscriptions, licensing, accessibility, and system requirements if applicable. After the system of checks and balances and acquisitions, the monographic information is sent to the cataloging department, who can catalog titles if there are not bib records supplied. The exhibition catalog is such a crucial resource for the art scholar and a unique publication provided by the art museum or gallery. It provides permanent access to a temporary event. The print catalog can be difficult to collect for a myriad of reasons I highlighted in my 2018 article, so the digital catalog brings with it great possibilities for access, but not without challenges, of course. So an example I want to share with you all is the Artifacts Press digital catalog Resonés, which I'm going to assume many of you are familiar with, but it's been a journey here at KU. So when we first subscribed to the resource, it did not have MARC records available. So it was solely listed in our long list of databases. Eventually, Artifacts created and provided individual records for each title, so now they can be discovered in Primo as ebooks. The transition from database to ebook allowed more visibility of the titles and resulted in higher use. In the past 2 years, use has flattened and does remain relatively low. Our campus museum has an artwork featured in one of the catalog resumes, and so I feel an obligation to retain this subscription and renew annually since we cannot buy the title outright. Much like your own 2019 report highlighted, this particular title is used because a researcher is looking for interpretive information on a particular object or work of art. This example also serves to highlight a question I often ask myself with digital art publications, which is, what is this content providing that cannot already be found on a museum website? There are also continuous questions that I receive from library users about the capability to download images and text in the Artifacts platform, which is not possible. The 2020 pandemic made many art historians and those involved in image-based scholarship begin to truly embrace the digital monograph or ebook for the ease of access. But in my experience, digital or electronic publications come with the assumption that one can download the title and its content, including all of the images. While this can be the case, particularly with open access titles, often this is determined by the publisher, who always sets the price accordingly. As we move further into the realm of digital publishing for art books, I'm invested in the conversation my colleagues have been having for decades, which is how to provide researchers with the content they need while also considering budgets, balanced collections, and access. In the aftermath of the pandemic, vendors and publishers are starting to respond to these concerns with new models. For example, Gobi Library Solutions, a major vendor for academic libraries, went from a print vendor to an ebook vendor almost overnight. And publishers like JSTOR are exploring sustainable open access solutions that support nonprofit university presses and invest in authors while increasing the impact of their work. Yale's A&A ePortal is another example of a publisher model specific to the arts, recently shifting to born digital publications. However, the model is in sharp contrast to open access models, as there's no way to own titles without an annual subscription. Born digital publications and ebooks with licensing and subscription costs have potential future negative impacts for reciprocal borrowing programs amongst libraries. Currently, there is no working model for sharing these materials. In my own scholarship, I created a digital humanities project in 2019 centered around images of Louis Lindsay Dyke's panorama created for the 1893 World's Fair and currently on display in the KU Natural History Museum. The project took almost 2.5 years to complete and required a large team of people across campus. The project allowed me to gain firsthand knowledge of what is involved in the creation of digital projects and why those on a tenure track in the humanities are reluctant to produce digital publications while continuing to publish single author scholarly journal articles. That is to say, there are existing systems in place to provide quick turnaround, access, discovery, and metrics. This is not to say that digital projects and monographs cannot reach this point, but as an academic art librarian, I will always be asked to collect where art scholars are producing and publishing. Thank you.
Are we going to have questions for Andi now, or am I going to do next?
Why don't you go ahead and present, and we'll do questions in a bulk at the end.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let me share my screen then. All right. Hello, everyone. So let me get started with a brief overview of how art history students and scholars do research. This was the prompt I was given. So let me get started. But since Stephanie mentioned earlier that I did a digital project myself, on ALK Info. There was a full functioning web-based database accessible for anyone who wanted to study graffiti at a mountainside in present-day North Korea. And today's talk is not really about this project, but if you have any questions, you can definitely ask me later about that. What I want to do is present you with two case studies, really like hands-on information about how I experience students do research these days, and then I will present a case B, which is how I presently do research for my current book project. So let's imagine we are at the beginning of the semester, and a freshman in my class on Korean ceramics has to do a paper on Korean potters in Japan. So what do? Usually a very basic keyword search on the KU Library website. They often use JSTOR and Google, but that's basically it. So usually I would meet with the student and help them come up with maybe more advanced keyword searches, also maybe take them to the library, and because they very rarely actually make a physical trip to the library these days. And identifying credible scholarship, of course, is always a challenge. And as Andi already mentioned, there are a lot of online ebooks available on the KU Library website, but many museum resources are actually not available. So they can only be accessible to the student if I know about these resources and tell the students about them. And then after getting a little bit acquainted with the subject, they would then start reading the approved list of books and articles, maybe also do an interlibrary loan for something, develop a vague idea of their research statement. They would create an annotated bibliography and also a list of artworks. And so for the potential list of artworks that they're going to discuss in their final paper, I provide them with a lot of digital museum resources. So for Korean art, it's primarily the Metropolitan Museum, which also has entire catalogs online available for download. And the one that is most useful for teaching Korean art is actually the Cleveland Museum of Art, that has a wonderful online collection of image data where you can look at things from various angles, and various resources are also provided, et cetera, et cetera. And then once they did a little bit of research online on museum websites, they develop a table of contents, which I again review and give them feedback. And for their presentation towards the end of the semester, I am very meticulous about having them do captions. So we practice doing captions, writing captions. And museum websites like the Cleveland Museum of Art, they really provide a lot of information about captions. So that really helps me teach students the skill to write captions for their PowerPoint presentation, for their final paper. And let me just quickly show you what I mean. So for instance, the Harvard Art Museums allows me to make a record of the list of the objects that I research and make them downloadable as a PowerPoint file. And that's really convenient because then the captions are already provided. But in most cases, when students use museum websites, they have to find where the captions are and what's important in the information provided for the captions, et cetera, et cetera. So in a nutshell, what do undergraduate students in my classes at KU currently use for their research? Primarily peer-reviewed journal articles, monographs published by university presses, and scholarly exhibition catalogs, primarily in printed format. And students, I mean, I want students to check out printed catalogs. However, they oftentimes prefer downloadable files, primarily in like PDF. Cleveland Museum and Metropolitan Museum are the two websites that I mostly refer them to. For Korean art, there are a lot of online databases and museum resources available, but many of them are in Korean. One that's available in English is the one from the National Museum of Korea, But other than that, it's mostly in Korean. And so the student would need to know Korean to do that. There is one website that is available in English, and particularly if a student wants to work on Korean art or Korean potters in Japan. Let me put this into the chat. A web exhibition. So if you click on that website, after Matthew A.B. Cat Stories of Clay, this is a fantastic resource for studying Korean ceramics. And the Stories of Clay exhibition has been so successful that the makers are actually thinking about doing an analog exhibition after doing the digital one. So yeah, this is a resource that I frequently use in my class on ceramics of Korea. And I'd already talked about this one. And something that I found really, really useful is the ability to show students various photographs of one and the same artwork. So in the case of the Clifford Museum of Art website, I can make an assignment for my students and tell them, use the Clifford Museum of Art website to search for the Korean object, download all the pictures, high resolution, and examine the picture, examine the object from all sides, right? And this is something that I wish more museums would do. That would help me with my teaching. When I was preparing for today's talk, I found this really user-friendly interactive website about Whistler in watercolor. Really intuitive. I really like the way how I can search the collection and really look at the original objects themselves. And now case B, I only have maybe 2 or 3 slides left. So my current work is on Buddhist architecture in Korea. And on the right side, you can see me taking pictures of the interior of Dikji Monastery in Gyeongsang province in South Korea. And there's currently no digital resource to examine these murals and sculptures from that particular temple. So all that I have to do is go there in person and take pictures and research them and interview the monks, etc., etc. So what do I do when I write a book? Well, I review secondary sources. I look at primary source material. And the good thing about working on Korea is that a lot of the resources are available online. So 60–70% of my primary resource material research is available. I can do it online. I don't have to go to Korea for that portion. For instance, literary collections or maps. So that's all available online. One thing that I found was a challenge for my research and teaching was keeping a record of keyword searches. So when I look at museum websites, then how can I keep a record of the searches I did on that website, right? And also the fast access to captions. That's something I've seen with, for instance, the Harvard Art Museum website, but it's something that I don't really see on museum websites in Korea, actually. And I mean, this is an ongoing issue with getting permission to publish high resolution pictures from museums. I mean, many museums have gone towards opening it up and making any pictures accessible for download for a non-commercial publication, but yeah, not all museums do that yet. So last 2 slides, what are the challenges of using digital resources for art history research? Limited access to multi-angle views and 3D models, ideally. So that is really something I would hope more museums would do. It would help me with teaching visual analysis to my students. Accessibility and language barriers for my students. So my main focus is Korean art, right? And many databases are available in Korean. So how can I make this available despite language barriers and maybe even subscription limitations to my students? data management organization. You know, if I wanted to annotate something I see on the museum website, or if I wanted to download data of researches I did, how can I keep a record of that? And sustainability and funding, well, many museum websites have wonderful resources. The question is, how much longer are they going to be available? So the stability is an issue. And of course, there's always something new coming up, right? So how can I stay up to date with that? So what are the opportunities? Well, in terms of image capture and dissemination, yeah, perhaps museums and institutions can find the funding. I know this is always hard, getting the funding for this, but having 3D models of artworks, multi-perspective images would be super useful. And having maybe partnerships with libraries and institutions outside of North America to discuss potential partnerships would be useful. Maybe there is some kind of an innovative platform or tool that would help me integrate my annotations into my own record keeping. If you have any ideas, that would be super useful. And staying up to date, well, I know that you are doing amazing work in the Museum Publishing Digital Interest Group. And I think, you know, joining an organization like yours is super helpful. But what about the students? Like what, you know, how can they find about current resources available unless they're joining your group? For someone like me who goes to conferences a lot, of course, I can attend conferences. Like for me, it's the AAS conference coming up in Seattle in March that have digital humanities or digital resources related conference panels. But again, for the students who usually don't attend conferences, what kind of platform could they use to access digitally available resources that are not available on any library record or anything like that? So that's it. Thank you so much. I have a YouTube channel if you wanted to check out my lectures on Korean art, and looking forward to the Q&A now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I can't get my video back up, sorry. But thank you, Andi. Thank you, Maya. That was so interesting. Rock chalk indeed. I see Elizabeth said that in the chat. If you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat, or if you are feeling so bold, go ahead and come off of mute and ask your questions for Andi and Maya.
Hi, Andi and Maya. Thank you so much for these talks. As I said in the chat, I was furiously taking notes. I'm going to go back and look at the YouTube video too to make sure I didn't miss anything. One thing that kind of stood out to me that I'd like to ask you both is around sort of the evaluation of these digital, like resources as you find them. So Maya, you were talking about the students needing to figure out, like, is this a reliable source or is this a source you can cite? I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what kinds of things you're telling the students to look for, what you yourself are looking for, and then Andi as well, like as a, from the acquisitions end, what are you looking for in a digital site to make sure it's credible, reliable, that's going to be around for a while? What are your standards in these for these things?
Well, I primarily recommend the websites that I found particularly useful for my own research. And so websites that have user-friendly search functions for finding the exact object that they're looking for. So for instance, for the Cleveland Art Museum, there's a Korea collection, so they can search by region, they can search by time period, and then I'm a big fan of the Cleveland Museum of Art collection of Korean objects. It provides a lot of extra information, even recorded videos, just analyzing the objects. I think I like websites that are very interactive, that are not just presenting data, but that are actually inviting the viewer, the user to click on things and find out about certain objects by doing not just exploring and browsing, because people don't really have much time for that, but really doing like a very distinct search for a particular object. So I want a student to find a 13th century ceramic from Korea. So how, Cleveland Art Museum allows me to do that, whereas other museums may, it may be, they don't maybe have that kind of backed up data on the website that allow that kind of search. So yeah, typically I just recommend Cleveland Art Museum, Harvard Art Museum, Metropolitan Art Museum, and then there are a couple of museum websites from Japan and Korea that I would recommend. And that's it. The British Museum has a fairly good website, but many of the objects from Korea don't have any picture. So that's a big limitation.
Okay, so I would say that I collect things across the board. It's not always scholarly, right? Because art historians want really scholarly things, but expertise looks very different in the visual arts, right? And so I have to collect kind of across the board. When it comes to digital, my main thing is this going to be used, right? Because I have to constantly advocate for the budget that I have and the resources that I have. And the way to do that is by use, unfortunately. And as budgets shift and move, that's always one thing that administration wants to see. It's changing a little bit as far as like the art collection is a little bit different, right? Because it's just used differently. It's more about images sometimes and not necessarily like statistics. But anyway, that the other thing is that I would say when it comes to digital, it's really about discovery, as you all know. I read your whole report. I agree with everything that you all wrote. And also your marketing, like, I might add a couple of things, but it's on point. The thing with students these days that I'm noticing is to get them to understand that research is not a book report and you have to look beyond Google. And so just trying to get them to think about why they need to branch out and even question what's in front of them, whether it's scholarly or not, has become a big battle, especially since the pandemic, I would say. But I generally try to collect, at this point, we are switching actually to e-preferred, which is huge for me because of the pandemic and the lack of access. But I also, when I'm collecting ebooks, or digital things, I want to know, am I buying this title outright? Or is the minute we turn off our subscription, all of this going to go away? Because as we move forward, I'm starting to really grapple with the ethics of information and knowledge production.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And I think that there's probably a topic for a whole webinar right there. Just to clarify, you mentioned the study. Was that the digital catalog study that we did jointly with some of the museums? Okay, I'm going to post that link for everyone who hasn't seen that yet. I'll post the link in the chat. Thank you.
Laura?
Hey everyone. I have a question. Thank you both very much for your presentations. I have a question sort of related to that. I'm at the BMA, the Baltimore Museum of Art. I think we aspire to have digital publications at some point, but right now, for example, we have something called BMA Stories, which is a blog of sorts, but also a cross with some scholarly content production that I will be working on in relation to an exhibition I'm doing next year, but it's also from visual artists from the community. So sort of this meeting point of a lot of sort of different facets of digital publication. But how would you, I guess a question for both of you maybe, how would you sort of, well, had students know, I don't know how they would know about this kind of source, that is more in the direction of a blog, but produced by the museum. Where does that fit in, I guess, is the question I have.
I guess students would find them on their own by Googling a certain topic. I came across museum blogs by just typing in a certain subject on Google, and then it popped up. I try to remember, but I don't recall ever going on a museum website and seeing that there's a blog. I think it's mostly through a Google search that I would find a blog.
Right.
Yeah, or on Twitter or X. But how would I student? Yeah, I don't recall a student referencing a blog, museum blog. Yeah, it's probably underused right now.
I had something to say, and then I was listening to Maya and agreeing with her, and it like fell from my brain. But I think with everything, in preparing for this, it was like discovery. And how do you get people to discover things? There's such a plethora of resources out there. And everybody wants to start with Google, but that's not always like the go-to place or the end place. And I think that really it starts with like your community. So you'd have to like, can you get in with the faculty at local institutions and get them to use your resource? And then that sort of like spreads to the students. People don't know what's out there until they're confronted with it. And I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the Lux initiative that Yale is doing, where they're like combining museum collections and library collections. In KU, it hasn't like officially been announced, but we are trying to work with our campus museum to become a part of that, because the reality is that libraries have these systems in place more so than museums, and there's great advantage to be able to incorporate museum collection data into art collection data, right? Because that's always been the issue, is getting how do we find out what museums actually have, because there doesn't seem to be a go-to place for it right now. And so you really have to know what's out there to even know what museum to go to. So if someday somebody could make like a whole integrated system, wouldn't that be amazing? Because
Maybe.
So if you're not familiar with the Lux, like the Lux project that Yale is putting out, I encourage you to look at it.
Sorry, one thing to add is perhaps the idea of browsing. I think many of us grew up with going to a library and just going to the shelves and just looking at the books and just browsing and seeing, what books have been published, and just kind of having the leisure to do that is no longer really there. Like I noticed this with the students. Students want to be, for an assignment, they want to be given the exact readings they need. I mean, they don't really have to go anywhere. They can just download the PDFs of those files because they're all available on the class course platform. So this, I think I could do a better job with encouraging students to browse. And that's not just by physically going to the library, but the same accounts for, browsing on the web, on the museum website. This kind of idea of exploring and discovery is something that I see less and less. People want to be presented, okay, these are the 5 books you have to read for your final paper, kind of. So there is less, you know what I'm getting at? It's less of this kind of creative spirit of I wanna explore and I wanna see what's out there. So
Looks like we have another question. I'm not sure what your name is.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, hi, this is Dave from the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia. I just had a question about what we can do as publishers to be more visible to the folks on the other side of this process. I was just looking a little bit at Primo because you were talking about that a minute ago. And I don't see any of our publications, for instance, coming up on there, and I don't know what I should be doing to, be able to be more visible in that arena.
So, so Primo is a ProQuest product, and it does not always play well with non-ProQuest things. It has recently, particularly since the pandemic, I noticed started really incorporating open access things, but there's like behind the scenes systems that feed into it, which is one, and I'm not a cataloger, so I'm not. Again, I like know what the names of them are, but I'm not fully it's difficult in a large academic institution because I'm like one person in a whole cog, right? Like but Primo largely is fed by Summon and also in Tota. So it's basically getting records or like information to those systems, because then our behind the scenes acquisitions department goes in and gets notified of open access things, which then they turn like on that get put into Primo. So when you're looking at Primo, you're just seeing like the public facing stuff. You're not seeing the system that's actually moving it all. There's another like whole thing that we use that's called Voyager, which is like the more traditional library catalog that is fed by MARC records, right? So that, but as we always talk about how we're going to move away from Voyager and use Primo. So right now we have too many systems feeding the library catalog. But if you would like, I'll put my email in the chat, and why don't you email me, and this would be a good thing. Like we can explore, because one thing that happens is I become aware of things and then I forward them to acquisitions and I say, hey, this is a great online resource. It's a free catalog. Why is it not in our system? Sometimes it has to do with the platform. Like browsing is something that it does not work with our online system. Or like, I mean, even like Kindle books, like people will see that there's like Kindle, but we don't operate with Kindle books because we're a ProQuest product. So if you want, I can forward it on and we can see like what the answer is from the library side. Like, why are your books not showing up? I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's my thought process there.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
So Andy, you said that you don't operate with Kindle books, but you do have like PDFs in your, so what formats should we be looking for? Is like online only okay? Do you need a PDF? Are there other ebook formats?
There are other, so like if you look at Artifacts, which is technically now owned by, it's not Artifacts Press anymore. They operate, can't remember. I'm sorry.
It's like
escaping.
Here's the Art or something right there.
Yes,
French,
yes,
like,
yes,
I don't know how to
yes,
pronounce.
exactly. Which is also confusing because when I went to look for it, it wasn't Artifacts anymore. It like switched its, anyway. So PDFs, yes, wonderful, great, all well and good. But there are like, it basically all comes down to being able to provide some way to feed into our system processes. I don't know the tech specs. I would guess that part of the problem with Kindle books is that that platform of reading, we don't subscribe to it, right? We're actually looking into getting a OneDrive subscription right now because right now we don't have audiobooks. But the thing is like all of these things at a tier 1 research institution cost tens of thousands of dollars, as opposed to like our little public library down the street that has to pay a fraction of what we pay. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, other than to say we have systems in place. Our acquisitions department loves when we feed directly into those systems, and anything that requires them to look into like licensing. We also have to jump hoops for like accessibility. There's all these different things. It takes a really long time because it has to go to like our licensing guy or accessibility person. It doesn't just like get loaded into the catalog necessarily. And it also has to do with users too. So like Amazon Kindle books, we don't buy them because they want us to have, they want to do multi-user authentication, right? Like everybody has to have their own account, and we can't do that. We have to pay you one time and have one multi-user across all IP addresses.
Thanks, that was really interesting. Maya, kind of the same question for you. When you're assigning things to students, would you require having a PDF if it's from a digital resource, or like is just a website okay? Can you just assign a link, or what format do you prefer for your students?
Well, we are using Canvas at KU, and all the readings that students need to do are available as a PDF file on Canvas. I would say 70% out of the time, the resource that they have to read is available as a PDF, which I downloaded for them, basically. And in some cases, particularly in the graduate seminars, I mean, the ability to find something online and download it is also a skill, right? So for the graduate seminars, I tend to not upload PDF files unless it's like book chapters that are hard to access or something. And I tend to just give them the web link, and then they can log into KU Libraries and download the file themselves. Yeah, in some cases, I would also present them, like if there's a free PDF catalog on the Metropolitan Museum of Art, for instance, I would just send them the link to the museum website. Yeah, but primarily it's PDF files, and also that's what students want. I mean, these days they do research and even write their research papers on their phone. So yeah, they want to have everything available in their phone. And for that, PDF comes in very handy.
Yeah, I was going to emphasize what Maya just said, which is like the phones. In the last like 2 years, I have watched a transition from always having a laptop. I mean, it's amazing how much they do everything on their phone. They, yeah, I'm just astonished. So it's like, there's like, when you're thinking about capability and everything, it's like, does it work on a phone, on a mobile device?
That's so interesting. Yeah, Emily?
Yeah, I wanted to dig into that a little bit more because, you know, if we're talking about something that's available, you know, that's useful on a phone, I think that conventional wisdom has been that PDF doesn't necessarily meet those needs as well, because, you know, you're not dealing with a responsive site or anything like that. I mean, so, you know, I think we've had some previous speakers, you know, years ago now talking about, you know, I think there's this tension where, you know, we're looking for in digital publications, like what are the bells and whistles, you know, that are, you know, really bringing some value added. But then there's this other side where it's just wondering, is PDF good enough? You know, and is putting out, you know, an accessible PDF that can be, you know, we're working with it to maximize discoverability and, you know, interaction with the library systems where we want to be found and things like that. Is that really like, where are we in 2024? Is that good enough? And I'd say that it's different too. Certainly, you know, Maya, what you were talking about, like, you know, the primacy of the object and being able to direct people to museum collection websites, you know, that have a lot of really robust resources, and the imaging and the collections data and everything. That's awesome, you know, and I think there's still definitely a place for that. But in terms of like presenting the scholarship in article or book format, like, are we still at a place where a PDF is still okay, even if people are, you know, writing things on their phones? What does that look like?
I mean, I can't speak for everyone, and I'm one academic art librarian, but in my experience, if something is not a PDF, it usually comes with an annual subscription, and it costs money. And it costs money because I'm paying for someone to maintain that website or those tools and have access. And again, I felt very differently about that kind of thing pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, I feel my ethics have greatly changed about the access of information and being able to perpetually own something. I mean, we're not born digital, is wonderful and great and comes with all these amazing caveats. But when I think about like libraries and how our culture is so much about sharing and reciprocal borrowing, and we're not in the business of making money, we're in the business of providing access to information. And I don't know where that fits in. And there's a lot of museums, like Maya just highlighted, that have these amazing free resources online, but it still requires someone to be constantly updating and maintaining those things, which in and of itself is a whole, burden upon you all, which, so I don't know that I have the answer other than to say that from my experience, PDFs rule because you can download them too, right? Like students always want to download things. They always, even like with ProQuest ebooks, I get questions all the time. They're like, why can't I download this? Why can I only get a chapter? They want like the whole thing. To them, ebook means I own this. I can have a copy of this.
Maybe something to add what Andi just said. So in my presentation, I showed the Whistler and Watercolor webpage, right? That has essays, and the essays have footnotes, and they're beautiful, beautifully designed. And I think something like this kind of essay doesn't require a PDF, right? People can cite it, they can read it online on their phone. But yeah, the question that I then always have, because I myself went through a digital project and had all kind of sustainability issues with it. So I'm always wondering, how long is this resource going to be online? So I think that's where it comes from, that people want to have PDFs. So like I would use these beautiful essays, but at the same time, I would probably figure out a way how to print everything and have a copy of that on my computer as well, just as a backup for if it's ever never going to be available or something.
So for things like that, just we're coming up on time, but I just have a quick question. Do DOIs or digital object identifiers make you feel a little bit more secure about like the longevity of an object online, since those are permanent links to information? Yeah.
Maybe. Yes and no. I mean, I think like being a part of academia that I was like trying to maybe not bluntly get at, but that I was trying to allude to at the end, which is like, we all have tenure. We're all on tenure track. Like faculty have to jump hoops, and we have to have metrics, and we have to have ways to get tenure. And as someone that like, I don't know why I took on a digital project before I had tenure, because it really set me back. I learned a lot, but I definitely should have done it after I had tenure, because I probably could have published a number of articles and gotten all my metrics and all these things in the amount of time that it took me to do a digital project. And it's not as a humanist, it's not in our nature to work collaboratively, right? Like I couldn't just create a digital project on my own. I needed all this help and all this support, and that's part of the learning process. But yeah, anyway. Maya, do you have anything to add?
Similar to you, I did this AOK project before getting tenure, so I I can definitely share your thoughts about that. But yeah, but no, I don't have anything else to add. Other than keep on doing the great work you're doing. Don't be discouraged by people not being able to find you in the libraries or anything like that. I think this is the chance, and with AI, maybe everything will get easier. Maybe not. I don't know. But I think it's wonderful to have digital resources, and students are asking for them more and more, you know, because they don't go into the physically into the library anyway. So they want to have scholarly information about artworks available right on the spot on their phone. That's where it's going.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
so much.
really quickly, so ARLIS, which is Art Library Society of North America, it's like all of us in academia, art and design, all, you know, we have a free listserv. So if you have an amazing like catalog that's coming out, like push something out on our listserv, because people like me, that's how I find out. And then I will like contact our acquisitions department and I'll be like, get this loaded into the catalog, you know, because it's one person at all these institutions doing all this work. And it's really hard to keep track of all the amazing things that you all are releasing all the time. So.
Thank you guys so much for coming. This was so informative. We really appreciate you guys being here. For everyone else, we will have this up on the YouTube shortly once it's all formatted and ready. And we will send out an email about the next meeting soon. Thanks for coming.